In the twilight of the 19th century, a man stood between two worlds, science and spirit. His name was Nikola Tesla, and he claimed that the mind itself was an instrument capable of touching infinity. But what he uncovered was far more radical than his inventions. It threatened the foundation of religion, science, and the very definition of reality. Tesla was not a prophet, not a priest, and certainly not a mystic in the traditional sense. He was an engineer, a builder of lightning, a dreamer of machines that would reshape civilization. Yet, what he described about his process of creation sounded nothing like the sterile laboratories of science. He spoke of entering states of trance, luminous moments where entire inventions appeared to him, fully formed in an instant. Every gear, every wire, every vibration perfect, complete, and alive in his mind's eye. He didn't call this divine revelation, nor did he attribute it to any supernatural being. He said the knowledge came from within, from deep layers of consciousness that most people never access. Tesla had discovered what ancient mystics, shamans, and philosophers had described for centuries. The human mind is a bridge between the physical and the infinite. But this was dangerous knowledge, because if consciousness itself holds the key to creation, then neither the church nor the state could claim to stand between humanity and the divine. To understand the magnitude of Tesla's discovery, we have to go beyond the man and look at the pattern that has repeated throughout history. Every great civilization began with a mystical insight, a direct experience of unity between human and cosmic intelligence. And every organized religion that followed eventually built walls around that experience. What was once living and direct became ritual and hierarchy. Tesla's life story is not merely that of an inventor. It is the biography of human consciousness itself, the struggle between freedom and control, intuition and authority, direct knowing and institutional mediation. When he spoke of his luminous visions, Tesla was describing a neurological phenomenon that science would later recognize in meditative and trance states. In these moments, activity in the brain's prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for defining the sense of self, diminishes. The mind becomes quiet. The rigid boundary between the observer and the observed dissolves. In that silence, something extraordinary happens. Information flows freely between regions of the brain that normally operate in isolation. To Tesla, this wasn't hallucination, it was revelation. His mind was not escaping reality but perceiving it more completely. He described how he could see entire machines operating flawlessly within his imagination for weeks before ever building them. And when he finally did, they worked perfectly, not because of luck, but because the laws of reality themselves are accessible through consciousness when the mind is properly tuned. This statement defies modern materialism. Yet again and again, history confirms it. Einstein spoke of his discoveries arriving in flashes of insight, not calculations. Kekulé saw the structure of the benzene molecule in a dream. Mozart said that entire symphonies came to him fully formed, as if dictated from a higher realm. Different disciplines, different centuries, one underlying truth. Human creativity emerges from a state that transcends the ordinary boundaries of thought. Religions have long known of these states, but they rebranded them as divine gifts bestowed only upon saints or prophets. The irony is that these mystical experiences are entirely natural. They belong to the nervous system itself. The same brain that invents technology can, under the right conditions, touch the infinite. This is what Tesla stumbled upon, and it terrified those whose power depends on keeping the divine distant, external, and inaccessible. Because if God is an experience available within consciousness, then temples become irrelevant, priests become obsolete. The idea of separation collapses. The roots of this suppression go deep. In the early civilizations of Egypt, Greece, and India, spiritual knowledge was first experiential, based on trance, meditation, and visionary states. But as these practices spread, priestly hierarchies emerged. Knowledge became guarded, encoded in symbols, accessible only to initiates. The divine was moved from within the human being to a realm far above, beyond reach. Power shifted from the individual to the institution. Tesla's life inverted that structure. His experiments were physical manifestations of inner experiences. He bridged matter and spirit, science and mysticism, not through belief, but through direct demonstration. It's easy to forget that Tesla's inventions, alternating current, the induction motor, the radio, were born not from endless trial and error, but from intuitive knowledge. He saw the patterns before they existed in metal. He trusted what appeared in his mind as real, and history proved him right. Modern neuroscience now confirms what Tesla intuited. That creative genius and mystical experience share the same neurological signature. When the left hemisphere, the seat of analysis and separation, relaxes, the right hemisphere integrates information as a unified whole. In that unity, time dissolves, and the mind perceives solutions holistically rather than step by step. This is why insight feels instantaneous. It doesn't arrive through effort. It reveals itself when effort stops. So what does this mean for us, ordinary humans navigating an anxious, fragmented world? It means that access to the divine is not a privilege. It's a faculty. You don't need to believe in a deity to experience transcendence. You only need to quiet the noise long enough for the deeper intelligence within you to emerge. Every time you enter a state of flow, while painting, coding, running, or simply losing yourself in music, you're touching the same field Tesla lived in daily. The zone, the trance, samadhi, flow, different names for one phenomenon. The dissolution of separation between the doer and the deed. Tesla's visions were extreme examples of this universal capacity. He operated in a constant dialogue with what he called the luminous ether, not as superstition, but as metaphor for the unified field of consciousness. What modern physics would later describe as the quantum field, Tesla perceived directly through inner observation. He called it the wheelwork of nature. But here's the paradox. While Tesla touched divine intelligence, society labeled him eccentric, because the system rewards conformity, not revelation. The more he spoke about accessing knowledge through states of consciousness, the more isolated he became. Investors withdrew. Colleagues distanced themselves. The establishment could celebrate his inventions, but not the consciousness that produced them. He died alone, surrounded not by disciples but by pigeons and creatures he loved because they were free. Yet his life remains a testament to the truth he lived for. That genius, spirituality, and science are not separate paths, but reflections of one continuum, consciousness discovering itself. Today, neuroscience maps the brain with scanners. Physicists measure quantum entanglement. Yet the simplest truth remains hidden in plain sight. Awareness itself is the fundamental reality. Everything else is a modulation of that one field. Religion calls it God. Science calls it energy. Tesla experienced it as light, and that light still exists within you. Think about the implications. If consciousness precedes matter, then thought is not a byproduct of the brain is a translator of consciousness. This would explain why in deep meditation, sensory perception fades, yet awareness remains vivid. It explains why in near-death experiences, consciousness continues even when the brain flatlines. It explains why Tesla could receive precise technical visions from within, because consciousness is not confined to the skull. It is the canvas on which reality itself is painted. For centuries, humanity has been trained to look outward for divinity, to seek gods in temples, knowledge in textbooks, validation in institutions. But every mystic, every visionary, every true scientist eventually discovers the same truth. The deeper you look within, the more universal the view becomes. Tesla's method was not faith, it was alignment. He entered the stillness between thoughts, the narrow space where imagination and reality merge. There he accessed the blueprint of creation itself. This is the essence of the trance state. Not hypnosis, not dream, but direct communion with the field of intelligence that underlies all existence. Athletes know it as the zone. Artists call it inspiration. Scientists call it insight. But in truth, it's the same phenomenon, consciousness momentarily freed from its illusion of limitation. Imagine if education taught this. Imagine a generation raised to understand that the mind, properly trained, can perceive beyond time, beyond self, beyond separation. That meditation is not escapism but calibration. That silence is not absence but access. How different would our civilization be? Perhaps this is what Tesla foresaw, a world where science and spirituality would finally converge, where electricity would no longer just power machines, but awaken humanity. But instead, we built towers of information and forgot the wisdom that gave them birth. We multiplied technologies but lost the art of introspection. We connected the planet and disconnected from ourselves. Tesla once said, "My brain is only a receiver. In the universe there is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration." He wasn't speaking metaphorically. He was describing consciousness as the true medium of creation. Every thought, every discovery, every act of beauty arises from that same universal source. To find God, you don't need to ascend mountains or kneel before altars. You need to learn to enter the stillness where your thoughts end and awareness begins. That is where Tesla lived, not in blind faith, but in radiant understanding. So perhaps the real revolution is not in electricity or wireless power, but in remembering that the ultimate generator of light is within. In the end, Tesla's message was never about machines. It was about awakening, about realizing that every human being carries within them the circuitry of the divine, that the greatest invention is not external technology, but consciousness itself learning to know itself. You are not a spectator in the universe. You are the universe aware of itself, building, dreaming, and evolving through you. That is what Tesla saw in his luminous visions. That is what religions obscured in their temples. And that is the truth that, once remembered, could electrify the world again.